here are a few problems where you can try and find the sides of cosecant, secant, and cotangent. So the first problem is cosecant 3 pi over 4. So you need to label your unit circle with pi and 2 pi. So this equals 2 pi, and this equals pi. So now to go around the graph positive, you go 3 pi over 4. So 1, 2, 3 pi over 4 is right here. And this graph, or this triangle is a 45, 45, 90, so your reference angle is 45 degrees. And you need to find cosecant of 3 pi over 4. So the reciprocal of cosecant is 1 over sine. And sine of this triangle is right here. This is the side for sine. And it's square root of 2 over 2. So the answer is square root of 2 over 2. So that's just the reciprocal though. So you need to find cosecant, you need to flip this. So it's 2 square root of 2. And if you have a square root on the bottom in the denominator, that's not a legal answer, so you have to change that. So you multiply it by 1. So square root of 2 over square root of 2, that equals 2 square root over 2. And since you're multiplying by 2 square roots, the square root just crosses out and it becomes 2. And then you just divide by 2 here, and your answer is square root of 2. So moving on to B, you're looking for the secant of 11 pi over 6. So I label my graph with pi and 2 pi here. Now we're going to be going 11 pi over 6 in the positive direction counterclockwise. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So now I'm putting my triangle on there. And this is a 30, 60, 90 triangle, and the angle here, the reference angle is 30 degrees. And the reciprocal of secant is 1 over cosine. So cosine on this graph is right here. This is the side for cosine. And cosine right here is square root of 3 over 2. So we put that there. And to find the reciprocal of this is just flipping it. So 2 square root of 3. And again, the bottom can't have a square root in it, so we have to make this a legal thing. So we multiply it by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. And we get 2 square root of 3 over 3, and that's our answer. Now for C, we're finding the cotangent of 5 pi over 3. So we write pi and 2 pi over here, so pi is 3 pi over 3. Over here is 6 pi over 3. So now we need to go 5 pi over 3. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is right here. This is still a 30, 60, 90 triangle, but the reference angle on this one is 60 degrees. So now for cotangent, cotangent is just cosine over sine. So we need to find what cosine is, and cosine's right here. Cosine is half, and over sine, and sine is right here, and it's square root of 3 over 2. But we also have to make sure and see if there's negatives. So sine is negative in the third and fourth quadrants, and cosine is negative in the second and third quadrants. So if we look here, cosine isn't negative, but sine is in the fourth quadrant, so it is negative. And then, so we divide by the 2 here, and we get negative 1 over the square root of 3. So the square root can't be in the denominator, so we have to multiply by 1, square root of 3 over square root of 3, and we get negative square root of 3 over 3. Now moving on to the next example problems.
So here the problem has cosecant 9 pi over 2. Now you first want to start off with labeling your circle graph. So you would label this 4 pi over 2, which equals 2, and 2 pi over 2. Now counting around the circle, 0, 2 pi over 2 equals 1, so 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, 4 pi over 2, 5 pi over 2, 6 pi over 2, 7 pi over 2, 8 pi over 2, and 9 pi over 2. So your location will be right here. And the location at 9 pi over 2 is 0, positive 1, x and y. Now, since cosecant means 1 over sine, you're going to have 1 over 1, which equals 1. So 1 would be your answer. Now moving on, you have secant 11 pi over 4. Now secant basically means 1 over cosine. That's what it translates to. So finding where 11 pi over 4 is located, you count 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, 5/4, 6/4, 7/4, 8/4, 9/4, 10/4, 11/4. So your location will be right here. And since the denominator is 4, you're going to have a 45-degree angle. So in this angle, we negative root 2 over 2, and positive root 2 over 2. So since secant is 1 over cosine, you're going to have 1 over negative root 2. Put it over here. I'll make that more even. You'll have 1 over negative root 2 over 2. Now, since you can't have this in as the bottom, the 2 moves up to the top. So it would then look like 2 over negative root 2. But since it has to be legal, the root 2 multiplies out to 1. So root 2 over root 2, which then comes to root 2 with the bottoms equaling 2. Now this is one way you can leave the problem, but since the 2's cancel, it also equals negative root 2. Either or is acceptable. Now for C, you have cotangent equals 3, well, cotangent 3 pi. So 3 pi is located right here on the graph. Now cotangent means cosine over sine. And the locations at this point are -1 and 0. So you're going to take the x over the y. So the x would be -1 over 0. But since 0 is in the denominator, it cannot be divided out, which leaves it as undefined.
Now you can try some example problems. So try number 3 and number 4. Press pause on the screen and we will do them when you unpause. Okay, let's get started with 3a. So 3a says cosecant is -7 pi over 6. So let's label our graph with pi and 2 pi. 2 pi. And so we'll be traveling in a different direction though because there's a negative here. So instead of going counterclockwise, we're going to be going clockwise. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So 7 pi over 6 is right here on our graph. And the reference angle is 30 degrees and this angle is 60 degrees. And so cosecant is 1 over sine. So we find sine on this triangle. And this is the side for sine, and it's half. and it's in a positive quadrant, so it is not negative. So the answer to this, to 1 over sine, is 1/2. But we need cosecant, so we just flip this, we get the reciprocal, and it equals 2. So the answer to this is 2. Moving on to B, we're trying to find secant of 2 pi over 3. So let's label our graph with pi and 2 pi. Now we're going in a positive direction to find 2 pi. 1, 2. So here, our reference angle is 60 degrees, and we need secant, which is 1 over cosine, and cosine is right here on this triangle, so the angle, or the side for this, is just half. And this is in a negative quadrant for cosine, so the answer is, for 1 over cosine is negative half. We need secant though, so we just flip this and we get negative 2, and that is the answer for B. Moving on to C, we're doing cotangent of 5 pi over 4, so we label our graph, our unit circle, and we go in the positive direction of 5 pi over 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Reference angle is 45 degrees, and we're doing cotangent, which means that we write it cosine over sine. So cosine is this side right here. Cosine is in the negative quadrant and is square root of 2 over 2. Negative square root of 2 over 2. And then sine is also in a negative quadrant, and this is the side for sine, so it's negative square root of 2 over 2. So we write that. And then when you divide, you get just 1. So the answer to this is just 1. Now on to the next practice problems.
So here you have cosecant 8 pi over 3. Now you're first going to locate where 8 pi over 3 is on your unit circle. So if you go 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, 4/3, 5/3, 6/3, 7/3, 8/3, you would then draw your triangle right here. 8 pi over 3, 60, and 30 in these corners, making this negative 1/2 and positive root 3 over 2. Now, the opposite of cosecant is 1 over sine. So looking here, root 3 over 2 is your y value, so you have 1 over root 3 over 2. But you can't leave your problem like this, so 2 would then move to the top, making it 2 over root 3. But since you can't have it as it's illegal, you have to multiply it by root 3 over root 3, making it 2 root 3 over 3. Moving on to B is secant 1/2. So it is located right here on your unit circle, with the coordinates being 0, positive 1, and the opposite of secant is 1 over cosine. With 1 over cosine is 1 over your x value, so 1 over 0, and since the 0 is on the denominator, is then undefined. Lastly, with C, you have cotangent 5 pi over 6, and the opposite of cotangent is cosine over sine, and locating 5 pi over 6 on your unit circle, you go 1, 6, 2, 6, 3, 6, 4, 6, 5, 6, with 30 being in this corner and 60 degrees being in this corner, making it positive 1/2 and negative root 3 over 2 for these locations. Now, since it's cosine over sine, it's your x over your y. So your x is negative root 3 over 2 over 1/2. Now, your 2's can cancel, leaving you with negative root 3 as your final answer.